Everyone laughed when they saw the empty wall. My paintings were gone, and my brother was smiling like he'd finally won. They used to call them worthless, dust collectors, midlife hobby. Even my own blood said they weren't worth the canvas they were painted on. So when I left the country for 6 months, no one asked questions. No one checked the locked room. No one believed those paintings mattered. Except him. I found out through a casual phone call. He said it proudly, almost joking. I sold them. Finally cleaned up your mess. You should thank me. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. Silence is dangerous when it's controlled. What he didn't know was why I painted the way I did. Why every brushstroke followed a pattern. Why those ugly colors were documented, archived, and insured. Years earlier, the government had come to me quietly. Not for fame. For discretion, those paintings weren't art to them. They were encrypted historical records. Protected cultural assets tied to a classified restitution program. Each one was registered, tracked, legally untouchable. $12 million worth. I listened as my brother explained how easy it was. Private collectors, cash deals, no paperwork. I told him I understood. I told him he did the right thing. That night, I didn't sleep. I opened my old files. Authentication numbers, transfer logs, the protection clause he had never read. I realized something then. He didn't steal from me. He sold government property and left a perfect trail behind him. I made one call the next morning. Not to the police, not to a lawyer. To the department whose seal was hidden inside every frame. They asked one question only. Do you know who sold them? I looked at my phone. His last message was still there, laughing emojis. I gave them his name. Then I waited. The silence afterward felt heavier than anger. It was the kind of quiet where things are already in motion, even if no one else can hear them yet. For weeks nothing happened. No calls, no warnings, just normal life pretending nothing was wrong. My brother kept spending the money. New watch, new car, sudden confidence. He walked differently, like the world had finally admitted he was smarter than me. At family dinners he teased me. Jokes about starving artists. About how some people create and others capitalize. I smiled. I let him win every conversation. Patience isn't weakness when you know the clock is working for you. Behind the scenes the process was slow and surgical. Government work always is. They didn't rush. They verified. Each painting was traced through international databases. Auction houses, private dealers, offshore accounts. Every buyer was contacted quietly. Every sale timestamped, every signature compared. What shocked them wasn't just the theft. It was how cleanly my brother had documented his own crime without realizing it. Text messages, emails, voice notes bragging about how easy it was to fool people who think art matters. He had mistaken obscurity for invisibility. One afternoon an old friend called him, a collector, or at least someone pretending to be. The call lasted 12 minutes. By the end of it my brother's voice had changed. He laughed it off when he saw me later, said collectors were getting nervous, said people were asking strange questions. Art world drama, he said, always paranoid. That night, I heard him pacing, back and forth, back and forth. He started Googling things he never cared about before. Protected assets, cultural property law, unauthorized art sales penalties. The confidence cracked first, then the arrogance. I stayed invisible. No accusations, no lectures. Revenge doesn't announce itself, it watches. The first letter arrived a week later. Official, plain envelope. No threats on the surface. He read it standing in the kitchen. Didn't sit down. Didn't finish, shook, just slightly. Enough for me to notice. He told everyone it was a mistake. A misunderstanding. Bureaucracy nonsense, he said. But that night he locked his door. More letters followed. From different departments. Each one polite. Each one precise. Each one asking for the same thing. Documentation. Proof of ownership, proof of transfer rights, proof he never had. He stopped sleeping. Started snapping at people, became defensive over nothing. Money stopped flowing. Accounts froze one by one. Not dramatically but quietly. A card declined here. A transfer delayed there. Small embarrassments. Public enough to sting, private enough to confuse. At dinner he stopped talking, just listened, measured every word like it might be used against him. Because it could. One evening, he finally confronted me, not angry, not loud. Afraid. You wouldn't believe how complicated this has become, he said, pretending to laugh. Turns out those paintings might have had some weird registration issues. I looked up slowly, said nothing. He filled the silence himself. Did you ever sign anything official? With the government, I mean. I took a sip of water, still nothing. The worst thing you can do to someone who betrayed you is let them talk themselves into the truth. He started spiraling, talking about intent, about ignorance, about how no one warned. I watched him realize something terrifying. That ignorance doesn't cancel responsibility. Days later, investigators visited the house, not aggressive, not accusatory. Professional. They didn't ask for me, they asked for him. Neighbors noticed the cars, the badges, the calm seriousness that doesn't come unless something is already decided. Rumors spread faster than facts. People whispered, people stared. The man who once mocked my worthless art now avoided eye contact. At night I returned to my studio, the empty wall still there, the outlines of frames like scars. I remembered every painting, every symbol hidden in plain sight, every agreement signed in silence. I hadn't lost anything, I had simply let him reveal who he was. The investigators called again, said the buyers were cooperating, said some pieces had already been recovered. They didn't congratulate me. They didn't sympathize, they thanked me for my restraint. One of them paused before hanging up. "You handled this the right way," he said. "Most people would have reacted emotionally." I looked at the wall. Emotion had never been the goal. Justice doesn't need rage, it needs timing. My brother packed a bag, said he needed space, said the pressure was getting to him. Before he left, he stopped at my door. For the first time in his life, he didn't look superior, he looked small. "If I fix this," he said quietly, "will you help me?" I finally met his eyes, and in that moment he understood something far worse than anger. That I had already helped him, and that whatever was coming next was no longer in my hands. I closed the door gently behind him. The house felt different after he left, quieter, like it was holding its breath. Days passed without messages from him. No jokes, no excuses, just absence. People started calling me instead. Distant relatives, old friends who suddenly remembered my number. They all asked the same careful questions. They all avoided the same words. I answered calmly, I had heard nothing. Truth doesn't need to rush when it's already documented. Behind the scenes, things accelerated. International agencies don't like embarrassment, especially when protected assets surface on private markets. Auction houses issued silent retractions, catalogs were edited overnight, provenance records were updated. Collectors panicked quietly, returned what they couldn't. Every return added weight, every denial added suspicion. My brother tried to negotiate, not with the government, with the buyers' refunds. Explanations, threats disguised as favors. But power shifts quickly when money freezes. His lawyer called me once, pleasured, asked if I was willing to sign a statement clarifying ownership. Suggested it could simplify things. I asked for the reference number of the case. The line went silent for 3 seconds too long. "I'll get back to you," he said. He never did. News articles began circulating, not naming names, just patterns. Unregistered cultural assets recovered. Private sales under investigation. People started connecting dots without saying them out loud. At a family gathering, no one mentioned my brother. They talked around him, like he had already become history. Someone complimented my work, said they'd always liked my style. I nodded. Praise after the fact is just guilt wearing perfume. Late one night I received an email from a government archive, a single attachment, a recovery list. Not all the paintings, but enough. Each title brought back a memory, each file name a year of my life. At the bottom of the email was a note. Proceeding to phase 2. Unavailable. I liked that word. My brother finally called. Not emotional, not dramatic, controlled panic has a sound. I heard it in every breath he tried to steady. "They're treating this like espionage," he said, as if I planned it. I let the silence stretch. "I didn't know," he added quickly. "I swear you know me." I did. That was the problem. "You always disappear when things get complicated," he said. "I need you now." Need is loud. Truth is quiet. "I can't help you," I replied calmly. "Not anymore." The call ended without a goodbye. Weeks later, his name appeared on a restricted list, not public, but effective. Travel limitations, asset reviews, ongoing cooperation requirements. He was still free, but no longer comfortable. That's the space where people unravel. He tried to control the narrative, told people he was being targeted, that it was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But stories collapse when paperwork exists. One afternoon I was invited to a secure building downtown. No signs, no reception desk, just a badge and a quiet hallway. They showed me a room. On the table were photographs. My paintings recovered, some damaged, some intact, all cataloged. An official spoke without looking up. "We're almost done," he said. "There's just one unresolved issue." I didn't ask what it was, I already knew. "It concerns intent," he continued, "and cooperation." They needed confirmation. Not of ownership, that was settled. Of motive. They slid a folder toward me. Inside were transcripts my brother's recorded, time-stamped. Laughing about money, about fools who think art belongs in museums, about family being easy to outsmart. "This changes how the case is classified," he said. "Your input matters." I asked for time. Outside, the city moved like nothing was wrong. Cars, people, noise. Justice doesn't interrupt daily life, it waits for permission. That evening I returned to the studio. The recovered paintings leaned against the wall, incomplete, scarred, still powerful. I realized something then. This was never about money, or even betrayal. It was about worth, who decides it, and who assumes they're entitled to it. My brother sent one last message that night. No excuses, no manipulation. Just a question. "Do you think I deserve what's coming?" I didn't answer, because the system already had. The next morning, I was scheduled to return to that building, to give my response, to sign one document. A document that would determine how the story ended. I stood in front of the door, hand hovering over the handle, and for the first time, I understood how much power silence really has. I didn't open the door right away. I stood there, listening to the hum of the building. The kind of sound that tells you decisions have already been made somewhere above you. Inside that room, they weren't waiting for anger. They were waiting for clarity. I sat down. The document lay in front of me, untouched. No pressure, no speeches, just a pen. They explained the implications slowly, carefully. What cooperation would mean, what classification would change, What consequences would follow? Not emotionally, but administratively. Systems don't punish. They reassign futures. I asked a single question. What happens if I say nothing? The official nodded. As I said before, silence is an answer. That word again. Silence. I asked for the weekend. They agreed. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from people pretending to care. People suddenly curious about art. People who had ignored me for years. I didn't reply. I spent the weekend restoring one of the damaged paintings. Carefully, patiently. Each crack reminded me how easily value is dismissed when people don't understand it. My brother sent another message. Longer this time. He talked about childhood, about loyalty, about how families should protect each other from outsiders. He never mentioned the paintings, never mentioned the money. He framed it like fate had betrayed him. That's how people talk when they can't face intent. On Sunday night I finished restoring the piece, stepped back, looked at it under proper light. It was never meant to be pretty. It was meant to be enduring. Monday morning. I returned to the building, same hallway, same badge. The document was waiting. They didn't rush me, didn't sell me morality. They just asked one thing. Are these statements accurate? I flipped through the transcripts again. My brother's voice felt distant now, like a recording from another life. I said yes. That single word shifted the entire room. Not dramatically, precisely. They thanked me, collected the papers. Said the rest would proceed without my involvement. I asked if I could leave the country again. The official smiled slightly. You were never restricted. Of course I wasn't. I walked out lighter than I expected, not relieved. That afternoon my brother was summoned again. This time it wasn't optional. He called me from a blocked number. Didn't say hello. They know everything. He said everything. I stayed quiet. They're treating this like intentional trafficking. He continued, you could fix this. They said you're the key witness. Witness. Such a small word for such a heavy role. You don't understand, he pleaded. If this classification sticks, I lose more than money. I did understand. That's why I said nothing. The call ended with him still talking. That's how you know someone's lost control. Days later I saw the ripple effects, subtle. Effective. His name vanished from boards. Partnerships dissolved quietly. Invitations stopped coming. No public disgrace, just professional isolation. People didn't cut him off because they knew the truth. They cut him off because risk is contagious. Meanwhile, the paintings were relocated, not to galleries, to archives preserved, protected. I was compensated fairly, not extravagantly. Recognition came in forms that don't photograph well: letters, clearances, doors opening without explanation. One evening I received a final update, not details, just status, proceedings advancing. No further action required from you. I stared at the message longer than necessary. My brother tried one last approach. A handwritten letter. No lawyers, no strategy. Just regret written carefully, like it might be graded. He admitted he'd always felt inferior. That selling the paintings felt like proving something. That he never thought consequences would reach him. That's the lie people tell themselves before systems remind them otherwise. I folded the letter and put it away, didn't tear it, didn't keep it close. Some things belong in storage. Weeks passed. Life normalized, too normalized. That's when I knew the final phase had begun. The kind you don't see until it's over. I was called in one last time. Different room, different faces. They didn't ask questions, they explained outcomes, paths, options. Each one precise, each one irreversible. At the end, one official looked at me and said, "This is the last decision that requires your consent." The room felt smaller. I thought about the empty wall, the laughter, the messages. I thought about worth. Who assigns it? Who steals it? Who protects it? They slid the final document across the table. I placed my hand on it and paused. Because the next move wouldn't just decide his future, it would define mine. My hand stayed on the document longer than anyone expected. Long enough for the room to understand I wasn't hesitating out of fear. I was choosing weight. The official across from me didn't interrupt. People who work inside systems know better than to rush a moment like that. "This doesn't erase him," he said calmly. "It only defines how history remembers the act." History. Such a clean word for consequences. I asked what would happen next if I signed. Not immediately, eventually. He explained it without drama. Reclassification, jurisdiction shifts, a permanent record that never fully sleeps. Not prison talk, not headlines. Something quieter, something worse for a man who lived on image. I nodded, still not lifting the pen. They gave me privacy, left the room without ceremony. Alone I thought about how strange power feels when it finally arrives. Not loud, not intoxicating, just steady. I remembered the first time my brother laughed at my work. Not cruelly, dismissively, like it didn't deserve oxygen. That moment had shaped years. Outside that room my phone buzzed. A notification I wasn't expecting. A gallery inquiry. European. Private. They wanted to discuss a future exhibition. Not the recovered works, new ones. I smiled faintly. Timing has a sense of humor. When the officials returned, will he know my role? The answer was honest. Eventually. Not today. That mattered. I signed only the preliminary section, not the final authorization. A pause inside the process. A controlled delay. They accepted it without comment. "You have time," the official said, "but not infinite time." I left the building feeling watched by nothing but my own thoughts. That evening my brother showed up unannounced. Thinner, older, eyes that kept searching my face for answers I wasn't offering. He didn't sit. I heard you were called in again, he said. Information travels fast when people are desperate. They told me you're deciding something important, he continued. Something that affects how this ends. I said nothing. He paced like a man negotiating with an invisible opponent. You know I didn't plan this, he said. I saw an opportunity. Opportunity, another clean word. I fixed things my whole life, he went on. You hid behind your work. Let people walk over you. I looked at him then, calmly, directly. I was never hiding, I said. I was preparing. That stopped him. For the first time, he didn't have a reply ready. He tried again, softer this time. If this goes the wrong way, he said, I don't recover from it. But belief is an obligation. After he left, I opened my old notebooks, early sketches, concepts that never left the room. The symbols he never understood, the systems he never saw. Art is patience disguised as expression. Over the next few days, the pressure increased quietly. Not threats, not persuasion. Reminders, deadlines framed as courtesy. Decisions waiting politely. My brother's circle collapsed further, one by one, not because they were told to leave him, because access disappeared. That's how real power works. It doesn't shout. It closes doors gently. I received confirmation that all remaining paintings had been secured, including the one he sold last. The most important one. The one that tied everything together. When I saw the photograph, I understood why the government had moved so carefully. That piece wasn't just valuable, it was undeniable. That night I dreamed of the empty wall again. But this time it wasn't empty, it was waiting. The next morning, I was asked to return for final clarification. Same building, different floor. They placed a new document beside the old one. This is the final step, the official said. No revisions after this. I scanned the first page. Then the second, everything precise. Everything clean. They weren't asking for revenge, they were asking for alignment. I asked if my brother had been informed. The official shook his head. He knows a decision is coming, he said. That uncertainty was already working on him. I stood up, walked to the window. The city looked ordinary, uninvolved, as it should. Big consequences rarely announce themselves to the world. They happen in rooms like this, behind glass, behind signatures. I thought about the letter he wrote, the regret that came too late. Regret isn't proof of innocence, it's proof of awareness. The official cleared his throat gently. We'll need your answer today. I turned back to the tables. One pen, two futures branching quietly. I picked up the pen, and paused again, because once this line was crossed there would be no revision, no appeal. No story he could tell himself to feel better. Only record, only consequence. I looked at the official. Before I sign, I said, there's one thing I need confirmed. He nodded. Ask. I slid one document slightly forward. I said, doesn't destroy him. The official met my eyes. No, he said, it educates him. I nodded slowly. Then I placed the pen down between the two papers, exactly in the middle, and waited. I left the pen on the table. Not signed, not moved, just there. The officials waited patiently, not of understanding. I didn't need to explain my reasoning. They had been watching this unfold from the start. They had seen patience become strategy, silence become leverage. I stepped away from the table and leaned against the window. The city stretched out like a living canvas beneath me, indifferent, unknowable. And for the first time in years, I felt the full weight of control. Finally, I picked up the pen, slowly, intentionally. Because in this story, the final stroke had to match the first, careful, precise, and unforgettable. I signed the document that ensured justice without ruin. My brother would face consequences, not violent ones, not public humiliation, not imprisonment, but consequences that would linger longer than any anger could. Professional isolation, legal accountability, a permanent mark on his record he could never erase. And he would know every day exactly who had orchestrated it. After signing, I leaned back. The tension in the room dissipated like smoke. The officials packed the files carefully, handling them like fragile glass. You did this the right way, one said quietly. Most people would have rushed, would have acted emotionally. You let the system do the work, and it's far more permanent than rage. I nodded, because I knew the truth. Intelligence beats impulsiveness, strategy beats chaos, silence beats noise. Leaving the building, I felt the world was smaller somehow, controlled, predictable. For the first time in a long while, calm replaced the fire that had burned in me for years. The next morning, my brother appeared at the family estate. He hadn't been told everything. He assumed he still had options. He assumed leverage existed. But he was walking into a quiet battlefield. Did you do anything? He asked cautiously, his eyes flicking around as if the walls themselves might report me. I smiled faintly. Nothing that matters, I said. Everything that matters is already decided. His hands clenched at his sides. I don't understand. They wouldn't act without you. Exactly, I said, and I acted without moving a muscle. That's the difference between knowing and guessing. He turned pale, realizing that my calm had been my weapon all along. The repercussions began to unfold immediately. Buyers who had unknowingly purchased the paintings were contacted. Recovery orders were executed with surgical precision. Every misstep he had taken became a reference point in the archives. Not to shame him, not to ruin him completely, but to ensure he could never repeat it. His reputation fractured quietly, Not through gossip. Not through spectacle, but through the meticulous documentation of truth. Within weeks, he was summoned for interviews, required to give statements, cross-checked, held accountable in a way that spared public scandal but made the consequences inescapable. And he knew, every step of the way, that I had orchestrated it. Not through confrontation. Not through revenge in the traditional sense. Through patience, through intelligence, through letting the system work while he remained blind to his own mistakes. One evening I returned to my studio. The recovered paintings were back in their rightful places. Some were slightly damaged, but each one carried the weight of history and protection. I traced my fingers over the edges of the frames, feeling the faint grooves of time, of careful preservation, of patience rewarded. I thought of him, of the brother who underestimated me, the brother who laughed at my work, the brother who thought money and speed could override preparation and foresight. He had learned. Not in a way that anyone else would notice, not in a way that made headlines, but in a way that would follow him forever, every choice monitored, every step accountable, every act shadowed by the knowledge of what true control looks like. The final message he sent was brief. A text I understand now. Thank you, I'm sorry. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the story had already ended. My revenge wasn't a scream. It wasn't a punch or a public humiliation. It was precision. It was intelligence. It was letting someone reveal themselves while the world remained unaware of the full truth. Months later, the exhibitions began. Collectors, galleries, and historians studied the recovered paintings, unaware of the drama that had almost erased them. I was credited professionally, quietly, for preserving cultural assets, but nothing more. No spectacle, no fanfare. I watched the people around me. They saw success. They saw calm and control. They didn't see the fire that had driven me to wait. And that was exactly how it should be. As for my brother, he rebuilt slowly. Every opportunity he tried to seize reminded him of the boundaries I had established without ever touching him directly. Every choice he made carried the silent weight of intelligence, preparation, and foresight. And that's the most powerful revenge of all. Not ruin, not humiliation, understanding, accountability, control. Because when someone underestimates you, the smartest move isn't to strike back immediately. It's to wait, to prepare, to ensure that when the reckoning comes, it is permanent, inescapable, and elegant. I looked around my studio one last time before leaving that day. The paintings gleamed in the soft light. Some showed cracks, but each crack had a lesson. And I smiled. Because I hadn't just recovered paintings. I had preserved my own integrity. I had transformed betrayal into strategy. I had turned a family's mockery into a system of quiet justice. The brother who thought he had won had lost in the most complete way possible. Not destroyed, not broken, but educated, and watched, and accountable in me. I walked away lighter, stronger, and untouchable. Because true revenge is never loud. It is invisible, intelligent, and irreversible. The empty wall was no longer empty. It was full of lessons, victories, and the quiet satisfaction of a story finished. And as I locked the studio door behind me, I knew this was the only ending that truly mattered. Not anger, not rage, but control. The story was over, but the lesson would last forever.